Okay, so please welcome editor Terilyn, Shropshire, producer Cathy Schulman, actor Thuso Mbedu, and director Gina Prince-Bythewood. Cathy, okay, yeah. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you guys
Oh
for
my
coming
God,
out.
Gina, how does it feel to be in the rarefied space of being a black female filmmaker doing a big budget blockbuster center on a black story starring a black star?
A lot of black. I think, I mean, still to this moment, I look at this film and it feels like a miracle, given Hollywood. But also this is a space that I've wanted to be in, and it feels like Hollywood had to catch up with my dreams and my goals. But this incredible group that we put together, the fight that it took, the 7 years to get this on screen, we were just ready for that fight.
Mm-hmm. Cathy, can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of the story, how it came about? I know that Maria Bello had originally, the actress Maria Bello, who produced the film, actually got a hold of the story. You know, tell us about it.
Yeah, Maria went on a trip to Benin, and she was able to see the beginnings of a museum that was being built there for the Agojia warriors, and came back to me and said, you know, did you know that Amazons are real? And I said, what are you talking about? And then explained to me that, you know, the word Amazon was, in fact, a Western, you know, interpretation of the Agojia warrior women, and it began an investigation into the subject matter and to learning more about the culture, and, you know, ultimately figuring out, you know, what part of this 500-year history we should, you know, focus on. And, you know, after a number of years of development and ultimately bringing on a screenwriter, Dana Stevens, to, you know, kind of essentially identify this period in 1823 that we thought would be dramatic and kinetic for telling a story in this particular, you know, piece of history. You know, I guess that's where it began. And Gina came on board and everybody, and it's like, here we are, and it is kind of hard to believe. And like Gina said, it was kind of a crazy journey. It seemed like an impossible dream to get a movie made like this. And I know for me, it took like an entire career to get into a place where my advocacy for women and advocacy for diverse people kind of merged with like having enough, thank you, kind of merged with, you know, helping the industry become more and more aware of the majority audience that is both female and over-indexed diverse, and that there's a reason to not only to make movies for the majority, not the minority, and to do this kind of thing. And so it just became this amazing thing that had happened at this time, and then all these amazing people creatively got involved, and there we are.
Thuso, your performance is physical and so physical and so emotional. When I was watching, I was curious the training that you undertook, which must have been really vigorous. Did that help you to get into finding the character?
Good morning, and thank you guys. Thank you, appreciate that. Yes, training really did inform my character a little bit because, you know, for me personally, working towards Hollywood was something that I aspired to do from a very young age. And similarly with my character, Naui, she's always wanted to be part of the army because it's a personal journey for her. Right. Where, you know, she wants to be wanted, she wants to be admired, she wants to be seen as something of value. And so finally, with me, I found my way here into this space where we're working with people like Gina, working with people like Viola, and being in a story that's so important, and I knew that would be impactful. we have Nawi Katunawi, who's also now in a world where she is with the people that she has always aspired to be. She has Naniska, she has people like Izogi, but we have to train to get to where we want to be. So I was able to easily understand Nawi's journey because I physically had to train to be Nawi. I remember writing Gina an email at some point being like,
Day 2.
like, because I felt so overwhelmed. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Because during the audition, I had like a physical and fitness test to determine whether I'd be able to do my own stunts or not. And for some reason, Danny, our stunt coordinator, and Gina thought I could. But getting into it and going, I am in way over my head. Is there a way to get a refund for this? But then also understanding that I needed to feel that because that's exactly what my character would have felt at some point. And understanding that what I was doing to get ready for my character was actually nothing compared to what the real women who were in training to join the real life army was. It was mind-blowing for me, and it let me respect it all the more.
Follow up, the fact that I've watched the film a few times. Unlike all the other, including Viola, the other warriors, you undergo a progression throughout the film, a physical progression. Can you tell us about calibrating that progression?
I think I was one of the lucky few who, somebody like with Viola and them, I shot my first few scenes like in the first 2 weeks of production. So like when we first meet Nawi, we shot that at the beginning of production. And so physically as well, we're in a place where she can't look too fit or whatever. And so as we progressed through the story, we had moments, where Nawi has to look like she's been in training and has to look, a little more toned than what Thuso would. And Gina will correct me if I'm wrong. It worked. However he did it,
Of course it
actually
did.
worked. Because I remember, even with the one of the final scenes, when she goes to Naniska to say, "Mother, can we dance?" and we see the abs going. I don't know how, but I know that I was in my trailer sneaking a few treats by then. But physically, working with our stunt coordinators, working with Gabby, our personal trainer, she had a vision of what needed to be done. She knew, at the beginning of, training, we did like a DNA test to determine what would be the best way to deal with each individual's training regimen. And so for me, I had to cut certain fats. I wasn't allowed to eat avocado. And you must know that was a fight. For me, it became personal. I said, "Get out! You can't take both potatoes and avo." But it was needed, it was necessary. And I think we see the results on screen.
I don't want you to hug the conversation, but a follow-up, the fact that I was aware of the fact that you're emoting and you have this journey, emotional journey, but it is conveyed to us through the physicality and the action sequences. As an actress, did you find that aspect more challenging?
I think it was a priority for both myself, Gina, and the stunt coordinator to make sure that what was happening emotionally for the character could be seen through how she is physically when fighting. And it was a thing at the beginning of training, Viola and I had to do this thing where we kind of had to swap our physical or emotional performance, where Viola was loud when it came to fighting, she would express it verbally, and I was like a silent trainer where it's I'm showing no emotion. And for our characters, my character expresses herself emotionally. As we see, she says, you cut your tears, you have to kill your tears. And she's a general who's been in this for years. And so when it comes to performance, she doesn't give us as much as my character would. My character when fighting, fights from a place of desperation, of having to prove herself. You know, there's a lot that we have to see in her performance as she fights. She fights from a place of survival. Now he is very DIY. She's making it up as she goes along. We see with her using the rope in part of the battle. You know, she is thinking on her feet. Naniska can create strategy on the go. And so we don't necessarily have to see or hear the fight in her, save for when she fights Oba, the first time that she goes and,
correct, yeah.
this is your tribute, and then you see the ha ha ha. That's an emotional moment for her, right? But otherwise, she was much more still. And so in training, I was still, Viola was loud, and so it was a case of, in conversation with Gina and Danny, you guys have to swap that, because now we did have to see everything Naui carried with her in her fights.
Thank you. Terilyn, you have cut every film that Gina has done, starting with Love and Basketball. That, if you have not seen Love and Basketball, you guys have some work to do.
A lot of work to do.
Terilyn, what I was amazed when I was watching the film is that it goes from big scope action sequences to small, intimate spaces. Tell us about managing those two worlds and making it a whole.
Yeah, thank you for noticing that. Yes, I mean, that was the challenging and the fun part of editing this film, is I got to use a lot of different muscles, and but yet within both the large scenes, and Gina and I had talked about that she wanted those intimate moments in some ways to be as seismic as the big scenes, that they carried that weight of importance. But it also was about modulating and really kind of deciding when to let these characters have their moments of revelation and quiet and being introspective against the propulsion of the action scenes. But it was important for us to give the audience time to get to know these characters, so that by the time we were in those fight scenes, you were invested and you rooted for them because you cared about what happened to them based on what you had learned and experienced with them prior. And so, you know, it's always starting with a moment, and, you know, even though with the action scenes, our goal is always for them to be character-driven, just as character-driven as the intimate moments. And so a lot of it was just, you know, giving each character that moment where, for me, as an editor, I'm the first audience, and I always have to be the audience to the movie. I have to forget what I know and kind of sit there and live these people's worlds. And so I just kind of find those moments that, you know, affect me, and I build from that.
Were you there from the beginning? Because there must have been so much footage.
So that's a lot of footage. Yeah.
So you were there from the beginning, looking at dailies and planning?
I was there. I got to Cape Town, I guess, about 2 weeks before they started. And because I've worked with Gina over 20 years, I have this amazing privilege to get an early look at the script and get, you know, involved in the discussions of the film. And there was a lot of previs to look at and stunt viz to start to kind of look at what the intention of the fight scenes were going to be. I mean, the thing that's great about stunt viz is it gives you kind of the choreography of what the fight will be like, but it doesn't have the emotion. It just is kind of the building blocks of what the intent is. And then they get out there on set, and the fight can become something completely different, and you really have to dig into the characters and kind of see. So yeah, I was there from the moment that they started, and the first thing that Gina decided to shoot, thank you, Gina, was the rise out of the grass and the fight. The first fight that you see in the movie is the first thing she decided to tackle. So I literally was, you know, in the deep end very, very early.
And that them rising out of the grass gotta be one of the most iconic moments in cinema.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys are going to change cinema as we know it with that moment. It's spectacular.
That was a fun night to be on set. Yeah.
Yeah. Gina, the main character, played brilliantly by Viola Davis, is unapologetically a Black African woman without the confines of what we've seen as being a woman. Can you tell us about creating that world?
Yeah, I mean, foremost, working with Viola is everything that you would hope it would be. And it's interesting because I think everyone has an expectation she just walks on as great, which she is, but the amount of work that she puts in is mind-boggling. And so for us in building that character, it was so much of starting, where she came from and what her trauma was, and how do we show the humanity of this woman, this general. And so much of our conversation as well was how do we, with this, redefine what it means to be female. And there's, of course, an expectation of if you're good at sports, if you're an athlete, if you're a warrior, there's a lack of femininity there, and we wanted to obliterate that. These women, these warriors are beautiful to me, and we wanted to showcase their skill, their athleticism, their vulnerability, show that vulnerability can be a strength. So just putting all of that within Naniska, and then you have Viola Davis embodying that, and that was important for every single actor, Thuso and Lashana and Sheila, Adrian, Masali, is to show the beauty in their strength.
Mm-hmm. Cathy, Thuso is from South Africa. Lashana Lynch is from Jamaica. Sheila Atim is from Uganda. You, in the casting, you have shown us this varied backgrounds of these women. Can you tell us about the choice in that varied background in the casting?
Well, I think for both Gina and for me, like, to be able to cast throughout the diaspora of Black experience and Black nationality was crucially important. It was also important for the crewing of the movie. It was just, we always wanted to shoot on the continent. I think we started by thinking maybe we could shoot in West Africa, and then there wasn't really enough infrastructure exactly where the picture took place, so we worked in South Africa in 2 different areas, in Cape Town and then also up on the Eastern Cape. And we brought in African people from all over the continent to work both in terms of department heads and crew, and then of course throughout the entire casting. So it was very important to us from the beginning that it was an international collaboration both in front and behind the camera, and that we, took out the sort of Americanness of making an American movie. And, Viola was obviously African-American, but the majority of the rest of the people really were from other places in the world, and it was an incredible experience to be able to work with so many people, and it was a sisterhood. I mean, the majority of people working on this movie were women. So, and I want to say that because that is not an easy movie to make, okay? And we were really out there, and it was a gritty experience. And it was incredible that we could all work together as women from all around the world to do things that I think, when back on it now with all of the, the bugs and the weather and the lack of internet, and from a producing standpoint, when we were working up in the Eastern Cape, we didn't have roads, we were really out there, and it was an incredible thing to be able to bring together women from all around the world, to do this thing, together and to experience it. And we also were able to build this 360 set, which is the palace, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And as a result of that, we could really transport ourselves to feeling like we were in 1823, and same when we were working up in the jungle, which is actually in your original, where you're from, right? In KwaZulu-Natal. And we were able to really imagine that this was real, and it really helped the whole experience working together.
Thuso, watching the film, I noticed that there's a 3-tier aspect to your hair, and I just wondering that dynamic, and also a 2-pronged story. Also, the weapons that you use are completely different to the other women. And did you have a choice on the development of the weapons that your character, and how did that help? Then sorry about the the nerdy questions, but those are the things I observe when I watch.
I hardly get those questions, so I absolutely love them. Thank you. No, that's definitely like, one of my most favorite parts of prep, those conversations, collaborating with our department heads from hair, to makeup, to wardrobe, to props. Absolutely love it. So when it came to hair, again, Nawi, is adopted, and she's like the oldest of 3 kids. And she kind of has to do everything herself. And I always talk about how she's, again, very DIY. So even with her hair, it was, oh, yes, another piece of information is that Nawi is tomboyish in nature. She's not your girly girl. So even when we put her next to her best friend, one of the conversations I had with Gina and the girl who was playing my best friend is that when Nawi sees a guy in the palace or in the market or wherever, she looks at him to see what type of weapon he carries. The girl, her best friend, is looking to see a potential husband. But Nawi is looking at his knife, the type of knife he has. What can she take from him so that she can recreate and make that herself, So it's, again, starts with the hair. Very practical. She wakes up in the morning, she has to go, get water, make the food, and, there were some moments that we didn't see on screen, but she literally climbs on trees to throw, a stick to get like fruit coming off the ground. Some establishes that, again, didn't make it into the movie. And so practically, her skirt cannot come to her legs. It has to come up to here because she is a girl who will hike it up so that she can climb up the tree. With the belt that you see, conversations, again, that I had with Gersha, because it was like, okay, it was too straight aesthetically. How does that look? I was like, okay, if we're going to put a belt on her, it's not for the sake of having a belt and to showing her figure. She has that rope around her because she wants to carry her cowrie shells in a little sack, which she would have made herself, so that, she can free her hands for whatever it is that she needs to do as she goes through life. So again, going back to the hair, it's practical. It's 2 lines, something that she can do quickly in the morning. It's not even tucked in when we see her. It's only tucked in once she becomes a recruit, because obviously now you're in uniform, you have to look a particular way. And so she still does it herself, so she tucks it in. And then we cut to in now, they're part of the army. Izogi does her hair, and it's that intimate moment that we see in the movie. And my biggest thing in having those conversations with Louisa Anthony, who was our hair department head, it was a case of, okay, she's not just gonna do any hair for the sake of it. She's sentimental a little bit, even though she would never admit it. So it was a case of, how do we bring in her admiration for Naniska and combine it with her admiration for Izogi? That's the story behind Nawi's hairstyle when she becomes an Agojia. So because Izogi has little pom-pom thingies that go like this, and so there was part of that at the end where we see, I'm sorry, can't animate and show you, but the little parts that pop up here are like Izogi inspired. The little mohawk almost thing is inspired by Naniska, And it's, again, she's not one who's all for decoration. She doesn't care about that stuff. But the culture is, with the different accessories, those mean certain things, and hence why she has them. Otherwise, she wouldn't. She even had a little bracelet when we meet her. It's like literally a strap of leather with a bead, a singular red bead. And that, for me, was something that Nawi would have created herself, because she admires the Agojia, and they'll always walk through and they're adorned in these golden accessories. And that's, again, something that she aspires to be. We could go on and on and on, but I'll keep quiet.
Yeah, but I mean, all of the specificity and the thought behind all of this, is this coming from the woman king over here?
In conversation, yes. I can't give her all the credit. She gave me homework, I came back with some answers. But yes, Gina, spearheading it. We had numerous rehearsals, numerous conversations. It was very much give and take. And even in the scenes between Nawi and Naniska, having had a conversation with Gina, what it means to her, what those moments mean to her, and wanting to respect that. There's a lot of detail, even in the script, which we really appreciated. And it's because of her.
Thank you. want to ask the editor, the epic fight sequence, how daunting was that? And, you know, it's
You know, yes. I mean, it becomes daunting from the standpoint of just the sheer amount of footage coming in, but you're also working with first, second unit, and often it was something where I had to kind of, you know, move quickly, because if first unit was coming through and then second unit was following, I needed to be able to inform second unit what we may still need, or what, you know, or at least let them see things that first unit had shot. So a lot of it was, I mean, generally the first time I watched dailies, I literally don't like to take notes, and I don't usually like to pull selects. I just like to be an audience member to the dailies and just watch them for the first time. But with something like the Oyo battle, which is 8 minutes of action, it kind of, you know, you have to kind of adapt to what's needed on set when they're shooting. So if there were days where I knew I was going to get a call, or, you know, people were going to be asking me about particular footage, I knew I had to work quickly. But on days when I kind of knew it might be quiet, I could really start getting into working on the scenes, and I found it to just be less daunting, actually, when you started to just kind of choose a character, because each character was going through their own journey within the Oyo battle, right? And for instance, Funbe's character, where we learned very early on that she's like, I'm not a soldier. And yet, by the time we get to Oyo battle, we see that she is a soldier. So sometimes it was just taking a moment from a character and building their moment within the fight scene, and then just building it as a whole. So I just, you know.
But we could have easily, during the battle sequence, just watching them being badass, but which is, yeah, if we're watching the Avengers, awesome, but instead you show us the humanity in each character during the battle sequences. Can you tell us about that approach?
Yeah, well, I mean, as an editor, you also grow to love these characters, and you take the journey with them. And so for me, first of all, knowing that these actors had trained as hard as they had to embody those characters, to do the training, there's very, very little double work in this movie. You know, I mean, these women are doing these things, and so for me, you know, because we had worked so hard, I had worked so hard to show you their humanity and show you their vulnerability through the course of the movie, it was really important for you to feel that within their fighting. You know, that these were, yeah, they were badass, and they could physically, you know, take down their opponent, but there was a purpose to it. You know, they were fighting for their freedom. You know, they were fighting for for their civilization. And so for me, it was just really important to honor that within the moments of the fight. And I love all kinds of movies, including movies that would be called action movies, but what I love is when you can follow it and you care about the characters. And so it was really about making sure that I was honoring the physicality of what they were doing, but these actors were giving so much emotionally when they were fighting as their characters. And it was really important that I gave you those moments. Like, it could even just be a pause before Zogi starts to fight. Or, you know, she takes a moment before she kind of moves her eyes to the next opponent. And those are the kinds of things that show you who they are as people, you know, and as warriors. But, you know, and that was the best part about this, because Gina goes out and shoots that. And I have the ability to get all that footage in, and I know I'm going to find it because that's who she is as a director.
Well, it's fantastic editing. Gina, Terence Blanchard, you've been working with him since Love and Basketball. Terence Blanchard, one of the greatest composers in cinema. Tell us about working with him in this particular project, and the fact that I love that the score is both cultural but also orchestral at times. You know, so, you know, just tell us about working with him.
Terrence he's a genius, and to be in that space with him creating this was transformative. when we talked about it, there was no other choice. It was going to be Terrence. I knew I wanted him to do it. We actually also brought in a man named Lebo M, who is also a South African composer, best known for Lion King. And so he composed the songs and the dances that you see within, but Terrence was going to do the score. And we talked about wanting, you said it, we wanted a classic orchestral score, but done with African instrumentation and then bring in voice for emotion. And that's exactly what he delivered. But the process of it, our post was really fast because our release date got moved up 2 months. And so he gave me the theme, and I fell in love with the theme immediately, but we didn't get to hear usually hear demos of every single thing before we go. We didn't have time to do that, so the fact that we had this prior relationship was really big. The only place in the entire world that had an orchestra available to us at the time was Scotland. So towards the end of editing, I flew to Scotland. We had 4 days, and it was so incredibly creative. It was literally Terrence and I sleeping in the concert hall and just composing, and I'm giving thoughts, and we're going back and forth, and he would get it finished, and they'd print out the notes and run it to the orchestra. And part of you thinks, we're moving so fast. What is this going to feel like? But everything he was composing just felt so beautiful. And the orchestra, he said, it's the best orchestra he's ever worked with, and they were putting so much passion into it because they get to see the scenes that they're playing to, and it was such an incredible environment. I've never been involved in something like that in 4 days to create what he created, which I think is magnificent.
Well, as I mentioned, you've worked with Terilyn consistently throughout your career, and Terrence as well. Do you have like a shorthand now? And Terilyn, you can chime in that you need to explain things, or you guys telepathically know?
Well, no.
Go ahead, Terilyn.
No, I would say with Terrence, this was our 8th project together. And so I knew that, he was going to bring it. But I think that what Gina created, when you talk about daunting, what was daunting was, basically Gina handing me the script, right? And me reading this. And then Terrence talks about the first time he saw the movie, because we gave him an early viewing, and it was a bit longer back then. And he just got it. And felt, every time we've had someone come on to the crew or on the crew, how can you not have this sense of responsibility? Like, you have to get it right. Like he said, I just don't want to fuck it up, is what he would say to you. But we all felt this incredible responsibility to get it right, because you don't get these very, very often like this. So
Correct. Yeah, Cathy, each character in this platoon, and if I can call it a platoon of women, is so clearly defined, and we root for each of them. Can you tell us was that a driven thing from the get-go, that we were going to get clearly defined women individually?
Well, actually, I would say that during the early stages of development, we were pretty much focused on the mother-daughter, story between Naniska and Naui, and it was really Gina who took a look at those supporting characters and began to, individuate them. I attribute it to Gina being like team leader and seeing them as an actual like team, and that everybody is important. Can I say this about you? That everybody, that each member of the team is crucially important, and each character's individual story is crucially important. And I think as soon as Gina started to identify that, then we, shifted gears. And as a matter of fact, I think we spent a lot of time trying to figure out if we were doing an ensemble or not. And it was one of the bigger challenges of making the movie, right? Because as soon as you expand into an ensemble kind of a structure, it kind of blew up a little and got bigger and bigger, and the script got bigger and the size got bigger, and and just sort of finding that natural balance between the character story that is essentially Naniska's story, which of course ultimately is Naniska Naui's story, and how to make the group of women equally as significant, was a balancing act from a development and a production standpoint that I feel like was also like the secret to its success in a lot of ways is that there's never a moment that someone's on screen that you're not fully engaged and identified. And same with the action sequences. I mean, Terry sort of, mentioned this, but there's nothing that we're doing with a particular character that isn't moving her arc forward. So there's no like random action moment where somebody's just doing a kill, right? And so that was important. And I do think it was really Gina who maybe you should be talking for yourself, but who brought this, to the fore in that way. But the development of the project was hard, and to find it. When you're working, there's no IP, there's no underlying, idea. There's not like a, book to go back to or some comic book to watch. So, we were constantly trying to evolve, what would make the most sense from storytelling. And I think from the beginning, just going back to, we felt that if we were going to do something this ambitious, now I'm going back way earlier when we started the screenplay, that, if we could stick with a relatively simple hero's journey kind of story, like in a Joseph Campbell sort of traditionalist way, that some of the other ambitious things we were doing would be easier to digest if we went for a really, really epic, character drama of a classical sense, which is what this is, in the end of the day.
Did you understand all along, Cathy, when you were making the film, that you were opening doors right and left in the sense that first, an amazing blockbuster directed by an African-American woman, starring an African-American superstar, and that, this is changing the way we see things.
Well, yeah, I think, first of all, I think that the Black Panther opened a lot of doors, for us. But
it was directed by a man.
Yeah, and that was directed by a man. But I want to say that, true. There are a lot of things we could say about the Black Panther, but generally I liked it. And but I think,
love it, but it was directed by a man.
And I think though that for me, like this was going back really to the origins of all this again. That I felt like if we're being asked, and with the Black Panther, it was like imagine this African nation with agency. I thought, well, why not just tell a true story of an African nation with agency? And so that was really the, that was the thing to do. And then, yes, I feel a sense of responsibility. First of all, as a white woman, I feel a sense of responsibility as an ally. It was always, it's complicated. And to figure out how to do this and where my particular place is and all of it, and I'm going to be honest, but I always felt like we had to be good and we had to be best and we had to like really, really hit it out of the park because we had a big responsibility, for the future of movie making, and I felt that way for a long time. My whole, I've worked on movies that all generally have to do with race and class and gender because I really feel, and this is going to sound grandiose, but like we don't really have a better tool than storytelling to change things in the world. And like if we're going to make it a better place, we got to understand each other. And so I personally have directed my whole career towards this because otherwise I don't really know the point, So yeah, I do think we have a big responsibility.
Gina, indulge me. Last question. I could go on talking to you forever. The color red, it imbues the whole production design, and the costumes. The earth is red, the halls, everything. Tell us about that choice, which is so wonderful.
Yeah, that came out of truth. That's the beauty of research. And the earth in Benin is red like that, and they built everything from that earth. So that meant that I had this incredible palette to work with and make the buildings out of that red earth. The clothes that they wore, there were indigo dye was a really big export of the Kingdom of Dahomey, so we knew that blue was going to be infused. But I just knew the contrast of that red with the lush green, the colorful clothes that they wore. I could see it in our incredible production designer, Keen McKenzie, Gersha Phillips' costume, like the three of us working in tandem to make sure that we got to really make this film colorful and kind of obliterate the thought that so many people have of Africa, the continent, just being dusty and dry. There's so much beauty within it, and that's really what we wanted to showcase.
And from my vantage point, I kept thinking about woman power, the symbolism of the red color, but that was me reading into it.
Well, yeah, that too.
I'm so honored to have the four of you here. Thank you so much. What an amazing accomplishment. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, before we're done, I think that we have another one of our actresses sitting here. Please stand up. Our
Masali
amazing
Baduza
Masali, who
Fumbi.
played Fumbi.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for coming out on a Sunday.
Oh, absolutely.